Hey everyone, welcome to today's Product School Talk. I have a special guest for you today, just really quick. For those of you who don't know us, we teach product management courses, data and coding in our 6 campuses. And we also host events every week at each of them, as well as our webinars. So today's special guest is a senior product manager at Dell. Her name is Mahuya, and she's here to talk to you about road mapping. So Mahuya, I'll let you go ahead and take it from here.
Sure. Thanks, Cassandra, for that introduction. So first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody to today's webinar, and I'm super excited to talk on road mapping. And the topic is road mapping and how, or rather, when do you need to make a U-turn? And things that I would look to cover in next 15 to 20 minutes are: what is a roadmap? What are some of its top benefits? And some of the common mistakes that people make when going about building a roadmap. And at the end of the webinar, I'd be very happy to answer any questions that you might have on this topic, or anything that you might want to discuss or hear about on product management. So with that note, let's get started. So what exactly is a product roadmap, right? The million-dollar question. So it all starts with a product strategy. If we don't have a product strategy, then the product roadmap ends up being just a grocery list of insane features. Yes, you have heard it right. It becomes a long list of insane features which nobody wants. So an ideal product roadmap is like a story, or it's like a movie that has a beginning, a middle, and a sweet end. And the sweet end is all about realizing the vision that you have started in the first place. So on this particular slide, I have tried to put the building blocks to formulate a solid roadmap. So let's start from the left. The first one is business strategy, right? So as you all know, business strategy is all about having answers to questions like, is this going to be a viable financial decision to invest in a particular market segment, or in a particular product, or a product that doesn't exist? So once people who are in charge of doing those pieces of work in terms of finding out whether there is a financial viability of investing in a certain segment of product in a certain market, if the answer is yes, then we go to the next stage, and the next stage is all about understanding the business cases. And business cases are nothing but understanding the true problem that is worthwhile going after. So let me give an example. Let's say I'm a product manager, and we got investment of, let's say, $1 million for 2 years to build something useful for the customer. So what all problems should we go and try to solve so that customers find the product to be usable, and at the end of 2 years we are able to give the return of investment that we have promised to the investor. So this phase, business case, understanding the business case, it's all about understanding the true problem of the customer. Then the next phase is all about, once you understand the problem that you want to solve through your product, what would be your unique value proposition? Why the customer should come and buy your product, not your competitive product? So it's all about figuring out the uniqueness that you bring to the table, and mapping that to the next level of details in terms of tangible features. Then once you have the list of features, it's all about prioritization. Prioritization is about understanding what needs to be done or solved immediately versus what can happen over a period of time. So there are, again, various techniques for doing each of these. And once the priorities are in place, it becomes a lot easier to work through the details in terms of understanding what all releases we would have, and working with the marketing team on the go-to-market and on the product launch side of things. So these are, again, a very high-level view of what all pre-work that are needed to get to a solid roadmap. Here, I'd like to call out that road mapping is an exercise which doesn't happen in 1 week or 1 month or even a couple of months. It takes a lot of time, and it's always a work in progress, strategy documents that gets built over a period of time. So in today's webinar, I'm not going to be able to cover in details, how we formulate a roadmap. I'm just trying to give a glimpse of all the hard work that goes behind formulating a solid roadmap. There is also another aspect of roadmap. Once you have a roadmap, how do you communicate that effectively to all of your internal and external stakeholders? So those two aspects I would not be able to cover in today's webinar because those itself are big topic. However, at the end of the webinar, I would definitely share some external references. If you are interested, you could read it to find out more about them. So moving on. So why should you care about roadmap, right? What are its benefits? The product roadmap is more than a mere document to silence the leadership team or investors or customer. It is the vision of the product. So a product roadmap starts with your vision to drive among your key strategic initiatives. So at any point in time, the company or the investors would have a pool of initiatives or products that they would be able to invest in, right? So so the road mapping is a framework that helps to get started with that activities and have the funding being locked down. So based on the priorities of the organization. So once the funding is locked down for your relevant product, it becomes a lot easier for you as a product manager to align the product vision with the company's vision, and also ensure that the the overall customer and market focus is also brought into your product roadmap. The second most important benefit of roadmap is it helps to communicate the direction in which the market is going and how the customer demand is also changing over time. Last, but most importantly, it helps to communicate your product vision to your broad spectrum of audiences. That could be internal or external. And that would help everybody to understand the evolution path of your product and kind of see the dream that you see for your product. So these are some of the benefits of product roadmap. So moving on. Before I talk about the common mistakes, I just want to call out that formulating a solid roadmap is definitely not an easy task, and more often than not, we all kind of get things wrong. It is okay to make mistakes as long as we all learn from them. And as product manager, our sole responsibility is to ensure that your product lives long in the market and customers love your product. So with that intention, I just talk about some of the common mistakes or common arguments we often hear, which kind of lead things in the wrong direction. So the first one we have here, which I'd like to call out, is we needed to get this feature since we are falling behind competitors. So how often we hear this statement? Quite often, right? The second one, the leader in this segment did it, so they must be right, hence we should build this feature. Another common argument that we often hear. The third one, so what if this feature would not be used? We want to come up as winners when prospects do a side-by-side comparison using a checklist. So I'm not sure about you guys, but I have heard this argument so many times from the marketing and the sales team. The next one, making a feature obsolete. Like, are you nuts? Subtract features. We need to add more and more features. Another common mistakes that we often have as a notion. Marketing team wanted a new brochure, so we needed to add this feature. So some of this might sound very funny and hilarious, but this is reality. Like, these are some of the common arguments that we as product managers get to hear when we question, why certain features are needed. And these are some of the arguments that we hear from different corners of the organization. And as I said earlier, as a product manager, it is our sole responsibility to ensure that the product vision is communicated and articulated very clearly, and we take decisions which are in line with the product vision and the product direction. And we should be able to, you know, explain if things are not in line with that vision, or if it is not in the best interest of the product, we should be able to say no. And the sooner we are able to do that, it becomes a lot easier to manage things. Before it gets very wrong. So moving on, here on this slide, we have some of the common mistakes people make versus how ideally we should look at things. So let's start with the first one on the list. The first one says focusing on building features. So this is a common problem that is most prevalent. So instead, the ideal focus should be on value creation. So I'll give a classic example. How often do you see a product manager talk about with excitement that in the next release, certain capacity or some of the technical debts are getting addressed? We never talk about it. We only talk about the newer features that we are adding to the next release, right? So that everybody gets excited. But the reality is, the more delay we make in not addressing the technical debt, we are actually increasing the per unit cost of development as well as overall maintenance of the product. So we are kind of missing out on the bigger picture. We are not really making decisions that is in the best interest of the product in the longer run. So the ideal focus should be to focus on value creation versus the narrow focus of just focusing on building features. And also, above and beyond anything, you should focus on the product's longer term goal. The second one on the list is customer at the fringe versus putting the customer in the center. More often than not, we product manager, we become, in our head, we become the customer. And we try to envision, if we are the customer, how we would use a product to solve a specific problem. And as a result, we imagine things that are not really what the customers are looking for. In reality, the customer may not be even thinking about that. So the ideal way of going about it would be to look at data, so that you're just not focusing on a particular customer or a segment. You're looking at majority of the customer, whether the problem that you're trying to solve, how majority of the customer would use your product to solve that problem. So looking at data, talking to customer, and doing and spending a lot more time with customer, that should be the ideal focus, versus imagining or getting creative about how a feature would be used or beneficial to the customer. The third one on the list is forced inventions versus insight or research-based invention. So more often than not, what I have seen, the way inventions happen, we call it accidental inventions or forced invention. Someone in the technical team, they are very passionate about technology, and some new technology comes up. They get really excited and they want to use that new technology. So they go and hunt for problems, like how can we use this new technology to solve some problem? Whereas it should be the other way around. We should be obsessed with problem. We should be going after finding problem, like true problem, and then we should be thinking about how can we solve this problem better in a different way, in a maybe radically different way, so that our end customer is a lot more happier than they are today. I'll give an example. Let's say you are a product manager who's responsible for managing a e-commerce business which sells shoes online, right? So adding features to that online portal or changing the user experience may not really excite the customer. In reality, it may be that today it takes 10 days for the customer to receive the goods that they order from your website. So if you can make that within 2 hours, so that might be something that would excite the customer. And making that happen from 10 days to 2 days would definitely or could definitely include a technology element to it, but it's all about looking at things completely differently and trying to understand what all things that you would have to do differently. Would it just be technology that can solve that problem, or do you also have to make changes to your business processes to make that happen? So we should be obsessed with solving customer problem versus getting excited about technology and trying to understand how can we use newer technologies to solve problem. The next one on the list is playing competitor catch-up versus learning from the marketplace and learning from the customers and data. So yeah, being product manager, more often than not, we are super excited whenever we see our competitors are releasing their product and the features that they are adding, and we by all means know their product in and out. And we, before even our product development team asks, we have the roadmap, we have the requirement spec being detailed out in the last level of details. We want our development team to build the next competitive product. But we are missing out the bigger picture. The ideal way of going about it should be to understand what all features that you already have in your product are actually used by the customer. What all features are not used? Can you by any means look at eliminating those features that are not used so that the overall operational cost for your product is reduced? So we kind of miss out on all of those aspects because nobody asks about that. Marketing team doesn't get excited if we think about or if we talk about eliminating features that are not used. So we kind of tend to forget about the bigger picture. The next one is a very interesting point. So we being product manager, we often think value is a perception, like there is no real thing called value. Whereas and we feel like it is the job of the marketing team to write interesting stories that creates the perception that our product is very valuable to the customer, which is completely wrong. We being product manager, we should be completely driven and obsessed by creating value for our customer. Every time we write a requirement, we should be thinking about how are we going to measure whether this feature is going to be valuable to the end customer or not. And every time we roll out a feature, we should have metrics in place to measure whether that feature is successful. What is the adoption rate for that feature? And in 6 months down the line, let's say that the adoption graph is not that rosy, it's not going in an upward direction. We should not shy away from proposing to our product review board or even to the customer that, hey, this feature is not as useful as we envisioned. So we are thinking about getting rid of it. So we shouldn't shy away from that. Being product manager, our motto should be to ensure that our product lives long in the market and our product is the most loved product in the market. The last one on the list is written in stone. So many times product manager, give argument to various teams that, hey, this feature is there in the roadmap, hence we just need to build it. No further question asked, please. But in reality, as I explained earlier, a roadmap is not something that happens over a week or over a month. It's a living strategy document because everything is changing. The market is changing, the customer demand is changing, and we are also learning based on the product that we have rolled out and the adoption rate and all of that, what is working, what is not working, and we are constantly evolving the roadmap. And there should always be a room for that conversation. So before I kind of move on, I want to emphasize that, I cannot emphasize more that an ideal roadmap should be based on outcome, not on features. And this slide kind of summarizes the common mistakes that people make and the ideal path. So I'd like to conclude by admitting that building a solid product roadmap is indeed a very challenging and a daunting task. And it requires both the right and the left brain to work in tandem. Please always remember that products those sell are the ones which solves true customer problems. So it's not the thousands and hundreds of features that actually solve and that actually sells in the market or stays in the market for long. If your product solves a true problem, it will sustain in the market. So please focus on that. So that's one of the key thing I would like to call out. And before I conclude for today, I'd like to mention about this book, Mystery to Mastery, Ideation to Productization Playbook. This talks about how to ideate, validate, and launch your dream product in the market. In one of the chapter, we have extensively covered or talked about product roadmap, and we have put together 2 blueprints. One talks about the how part. We call that product roadmap toolkit, like the pieces that I was referring to in the earlier slides, in terms of all the things, all the pre-work that one needs to do to get or build a solid roadmap. So, and the other toolkit we have mentioned about in the book is called the product calendar. It talks about, or it lays down, how can you effectively communicate your current, near, and future direction of the product in a more effective way to your internal and external audiences. So yes, I have put the link. So if you are interested, you can get a copy from the link here, and we'll be sharing the presentation after the webinar. So yeah, this kind of brings us to the end of the webinar. So I would hand it over to Cassandra to read out the questions, and we shall take it from there.
Awesome, great presentation. And thank you for sharing all that. And that was a really good list of common mistakes. So definitely really thorough. We already have a few questions that came through, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this top one from Adept. How are roadmap creation and software engineering models, for example, agile, related? And do these models affect the roadmap creation?
Yeah, so that's it. Thank you for that question, Sandra. So yes, that's a great question. So roadmap creation is the first step, for regardless of agile methodology is a development methodology that is used to build the product, right? So as I have mentioned or tried to explain that the what you build, that comes at a later stage, but roadmap is all about having that vision in place, and a roadmap is the blueprint of how do you get from point A to point Z. So it's the vision, and once you have that vision, in terms of during execution, how when you build the features and when you develop the features, agile methodology is one of the methodology that companies follow nowadays to build the software.
Awesome, thank you for answering that. We have a couple more here. So this one's from Prasad. Does the roadmap change during the course of time?
Yes. So definitely, thank you for that question. So yes, a roadmap is a living strategy document. It changes from time to time because the market changes, the customer needs changes, and being product manager, we are also constantly learning from the earlier releases, right? What the adoption rate, what are the features that customers are using versus what are the features customers are not using. So time to time, we make changes and we align our roadmap accordingly.
Right, absolutely. And I'm going to actually jump to the follow-up on that from Prasad as well. How do we prioritize features to be added to the product and bring that to market?
Yes, so that's again a great question. So there are various techniques of prioritization. One of the common techniques that are used for prioritization is scoring, feature-based scoring, and putting some weightages. So it again depends from company to company and what methodology that they use. I'll give an example. Let's say in a given year, the objective of your product is, or the focus of the product is to increase the market share, and you're not really focused or looking at revenue. So in order to increase the market share, there would be certain aspects that you would prioritize more versus other things. For example, you would prioritize more on having more functional features versus non-functional features. So depending on the strategic goal of the product, you would know what are the key things or key goals that the product needs to solve in that given year or that given time, and accordingly you assign weightages, and then you do a scoring. And again, in one of these steps during scoring, you take customer input in terms, and again, there are various companies have customer advocacy board where they invite their most vocal customers, and they have adequate presence from all segment. So those customers get to score your the list of features, and then you kind of take it from there.
Okay, awesome. Here's another question. Let's see, from, we have a few come in. So like, this one is from Varen. How do you account for technical research? So for example, a new API introduced by Apple, how do you account for that in the roadmap?
Right. So how do you account for technical research, right? So that's a great question, actually. And again, there is no right or wrong, approach to that. I would say it's more of a mindset than, accounting for something. If being a product manager, if you feel that innovation is something that you are very passionate about and that should be part of the product, then it's just a mindset that you try to cultivate. And one of the things that I talked about or touched upon was technical debt, right? So if I am the product manager, I would always, try to influence the product strategy, and I would always try to account some amount of capacity for technical research, and ensuring that some capacity is utilized for solving technical debt. So it should definitely, as a product manager, you should always try to influence the product strategy so that certain capacity is kept aside for those kind of activities, doing technical research, and ensuring that we are actively addressing technical debts and thinking about, using the latest and greatest technology and going in that direction.
Right, exactly. We have time for just one more question. A few people have jumped in and backed this one. Can you talk about which tools or software that make building or changing your roadmap relatively painless, or which tools you use?
Sure. So there are plenty. I don't have any, favorites. There are many that I have used. I have used Rally. Currently, we use Microsoft TFS in my current organization. I've also used Jira. There is one product that I mean, again, this is my personal opinion. It's called ProdPad. I really like that because it is aligned to, the product manager's way of work. So they had a nice way of formulating the roadmap, and it was very easy to use. So, my favorite would be ProdPad, but again, there are tons of tools out there, and yeah, so I'd leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I've definitely heard a lot of good things about ProdPad. Great. Well, before we close it out, can you share your advice for aspiring product managers out there?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of advices I'd like to kind of, give. Number one, whenever you get time or opportunity, ensure that you spend time with your customers. How they use your product, what matters to them, what are problem for them. Many a times, we just assume that something is a problem without actually having the right artifacts. So yeah, spend time with your customer. Ask question. No question is a dumb question. So yeah, ask questions, and I would say focus on what, not how, right? Focus on, the big picture. Focus on what, not on the how part. That comes much later. And most importantly, communicate, and communicate the product roadmap, product direction, because it is us, who are responsible for holding or taking the vision of the product forward. So we should actively communicate the product vision and the product direction. And lastly, my advice would be to dream about building the products you wished existed. So then we would have a world with a lot more beautiful and usable product. So yeah, I'd close at that.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Mahuya, for taking the time to be with us today and share that awesome presentation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
It was great having you. And thanks also to everyone who joined us today. If you haven't heard, we released the product book last month. It's already a bestseller, so if you don't have a copy yet, you can find it on Amazon. And make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You'll get updates on whenever we publish a new video. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Bye.